Poverty is a complex phenomenon. There's both the lack of basic services, such as access to water, education, healthcare, energy, but there's also social structures that may maintain certain groups of the population in a situation of poverty. So when we look at entrepreneurial solutions to poverty, we want to see that these solutions address both these aspects of poverty. So that would mean entrepreneurial solutions that empower local actors in terms of becoming entrepreneurs or getting jobs, entrepreneurial solutions that challenge social structures. That might be, for example, in the case of Husk, that energy is produced locally rather than centrally, giving the local economy more possibilities to be resilient in energy terms. And it also means that in terms of products and services, sort of access to energy or access to other basic services. So we need to look at all these things to fully understand if entrepreneurship affects poverty and how.
My name is Marleen Wierenga and I'm a doctoral researcher in the New Global Project, and I've been studying grassroots entrepreneurs, so low-income entrepreneurs, and I'm trying to understand how these low-income entrepreneurs are able to develop innovations and become entrepreneurs. I would say what differentiates grassroots entrepreneurs from, let's say, the typical entrepreneur from a more wealthier background is that they are very isolated. So the cases that I've studied, they live in the rural areas, so far away from the city, and the cities typically have more resources. The infrastructure is very poor, so the roads are poor, and reaching the biggest city close by is not that easy. They might not be able to speak, so my cases come from India, and they might not be able to speak Hindi. And they have their own local dialects, which also isolates them from the rest of society. And then the fact that they haven't completed education means that they just don't know many things in society. For example, one case, one entrepreneur didn't know that he could actually go to a bank and ask for a loan. So these very basic things that are very normal for us and for anyone who has gone to school and done some basic math classes, very basic things, but then if you haven't, then you just don't know. And because of the environment where they live, their neighbors and their peers have similar backgrounds. And then if no one knows, you can ask your neighbor, but the neighbor doesn't know much more than what you know. So this isolation on these many different levels is what differentiates grassroots entrepreneurs from a more wealthier entrepreneur. Entrepreneurship can be understood as opportunity-motivated entrepreneurs or necessity-motivated entrepreneurs. And for example, this Husk Power System case is an example of an opportunity-motivated entrepreneur. These individuals knew about the lack of electricity in this particular area, and they had in mind the technology. They went there, and they sort of found that there was a market for their solution. But then when we talk about low-income entrepreneurs, it's typically necessity-motivated, so that you buy, let's say, a bunch of tomatoes in the morning, and you try to sell all of them, and at the end of the day, you hopefully have sold all of them, you've made some profit, you're able to buy food for your family, if you're lucky, a little bit to the side for education or for the rainy day, and then enough so that the next morning you would start the same again, buying tomatoes and selling them. So these necessity-motivated entrepreneurs don't really have the potential to grow. So they're selling tomatoes day after day. But then if we think of poverty alleviation, it's alleviating poverty in a very short term, but in the long term there is not that much growth potential, like economic growth or poverty alleviation potential in such necessity-motivated entrepreneurs. So then the question is entrepreneurship a solution to alleviate poverty for everyone, or should we emphasize and provide facilities for the entrepreneurs that have this entrepreneurial potential in them, that they would create jobs, for instance, for other people who would then find a job, and that would give them a stable income and hence then alleviate poverty. So one of the entrepreneurs that I've studied is Manchukbhai Prajapati, who is the entrepreneur behind Mitikool. And Mitikool is a company that has different kinds of clay innovations. The most well-known one is the Mitikool fridge, so a fridge that is made out of clay. It's basically a box where water is circulating inside, and you can put fruit and vegetables inside. And the temperature inside the fridge is 10-15 degrees lower than the outside temperature. And where he comes from, the summers are very hot. So when it's 50 degrees outside, you can still have sort of cool, and you can store your vegetables and fruits for like 5 to 7 days. And then one other case is Manchukbhai Jagani, who has developed the Bullet Santi tractor. And that's a 3-wheel tractor, and it's lighter than a normal tractor, and it's cheaper as well. And it's used in cotton fields. And what the people that use those tractors told me is that it's because it's lighter and it's smaller, it can turn better on the field, and the users were very happy with that. And this process started, he had an uncle, and the uncle had an old motorcycle, and then he modified of that old motorcycle this 3-wheel tractor. So if we think about these people, like when they have already the innovation ready and they're trying to sell it on the market, one big challenge is, for example, that they don't know or they don't feel comfortable approaching a retailer. So they are very much aware of the fact that they are low-class individuals, that they don't really have the status of being an entrepreneur when they go outside of their comfort zone within the village. So that's one aspect. Then another one is that they don't know about the laws, accounting, taxation. So they're very practical questions where they need help. So in my research, I've looked also at in more detail on the scaling process. So how do they manage to sell outside their own village, outside their own community? And there are a few things where outside, like support organizations, can help. So one is acknowledging that the machine is actually an innovation and it works. Then they are also given a patent for the innovation, which is also proof that it's actually something meaningful. So the societal impact of these entrepreneurs, I would say, is firstly through the products, the machine that they have developed. And then also locally, they employ people. So for example, the Mitikool entrepreneur Manchukbhai Prajapati, he has 2 factories today, and he employs about 80 persons in total in these factories. And then he has about 10 people, office staff. So that's one big impact in the locality. When I was meeting these entrepreneurs, they were all asking me, how is this done in Finland? And I'm not that much an expert in agricultural innovations. I couldn't really tell them, but there is clearly interest in how things are done elsewhere.
My name is Tatu Lyytinen, and I'm working as a researcher in ALDA New Global Project, and my research topic there is sustainable business models. So the Husk Power System is a company that was founded in 2007 by 2 Indian entrepreneurs or Indian person who were working in a quite good positions in the United States. And they were making a good wealth in the United States, and then they started to think that, okay, what good they could do in their home country, and especially in the home region, that is the Bihar in northeast India. That is one of the poorest places in the world. The idea was to not to build like big centralized power plant, but really bring the energy production to the village level. And that's why they also decided to do this kind of smaller scale solution, that they could actually bring the energy production in the village, which would mean that the local resources would be used for the energy production, and at the same time they could employ local people to work with the plant. So my first research, of course, in this area was to understand the impacts of the husk power system. So I was looking in a study the economic, social and environmental impacts of husk power systems. And of course the environmental impact is the use of bioenergy. And then the social impact, of course, is to involving the local people in the processes and educating them. And then the economic impact, of course, is that the idea there when you do the local production is that most of the economic impact generated by the production remains in the local economy. I think in a big picture what the husk power system or the kind of the founders of the husk power system has done is to show that even the wealthier people can do good in a lower income economies. And I think it's a kind of, if you look the kind of global income flows, it's a way to kind of reverse the capital flows. So what the husk power system entrepreneur has been able to do is that they will have been able to allocate or redirect global wealth to the poorest of the poor in the world. And when I've been looking at the case, I think that this is something that the grassroots entrepreneurs are not able to do. And you need this kind of wealthy people to intermediate those capital flows to give the possibility of grassroots entrepreneurs to access to those networks. What husk power has done is to kind of, even it's not technologically that advanced what they have done, but they have done something that the gasification did in Finland during the Second World War. So when there's a really big scarcity of the resources, you need to develop solutions that fit to that context. I think what the Finnish companies can learn from the husk power systems is that, okay, so first it's quite good to have a person who knows the local environment. So I think the husk power system was so successful because one of the founders were from that region. So he really knew everybody from the grassroots level to the higher political level. So I think that's one good learning point, to really hire people who knows those environments where you are going. I think what opportunities these markets offer for the Western or Finnish companies, that they are really new markets. So there's no solutions for most of the basic needs. So the water, energy, housing, mobile communications, health, education. And those are markets where you can test new solutions and that you don't have the kind of the legacy systems slowing your process normally.